And this whole ordeal really got me wondering because I do try. Sometimes it can come across, particularly if you only watch the podcast and you don't know me or converse with me outside of this, limited scope. It can really seem that I am like 100% like evil capitalist. Like capitalism can do no wrong. Representative democracy can do no wrong, and that capitalism is, I mean, not capitalism, communism is pure evil, which, I mean, that's true, but I can go into why. That's, to me, that's not a hyperbolic talking point. I actually do believe that the essence of communism is evil, because even the crux of communism in and of itself is unjust, in my opinion. But I did really start to dig, because I didn't want to go into this discussion being like, yeah, communism's garbage, blah, 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 blah. I wanted to actually see, maybe there is something to communism. I know that communism, as it's been practiced thus far, has not worked, but maybe pure communism has something to it. And I'll admit, I've not read the Communist Manifesto in its entirety, although I do plan to. But as far as tonight, I have not read it all, but I have a kind of like passing understanding of what Karl Marx was trying to get at and who he was. And I'm going to bring this up again, bring up one of my favorite terms, Sitzenleben, situation in life. So when you're talking about pure communism, or pure Marxism, I guess is a more appropriate term, but Marx called it communism, is you have to understand where the world was at when he wrote the Communist Manifesto. A lot of the world, particularly Europe, was still largely, at least to a certain extent, still under autocratic rule. And this includes Russia. This includes, I don't even know if Germany is a valid, I'm going to say Germany just for simplicity's sake, but I don't even know if that's really a valid classification, because the nation of Germany as we know it didn't really exist as we know it yet. France had just gone through, in very recent memory, an extremely violent and troublesome revolution, and then Napoleon happened. So while it may not have been considered a pure monarchy, there's no denying that Napoleon was an autocrat, if ever there was one. The United Kingdom was still a constitutional monarchy, but a monarchy nonetheless. And I believe, and this one I'm not sure of, I believe Spain was still a monarchy. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. But most of Europe was autocratic. And then Russia had the Tsar. So definitely still autocratic. And I would probably make the case that pure unfettered capitalism outside of the United States really hadn't been done in a grand scale yet. Because to a certain extent, particularly in Europe, all of the business still somewhat was dependent on the head of state to regulate, or in this case, probably soften. Now, there were capitalists and business owners and merchants, obviously, but again, that kind of pure unfettered capitalism where you could be born a pauper and through your own action, knowledge, and, with a little bit of luck too, you could rise to become one of the richest men in the country, if not the world. I think that really only existed in the United States at the time. And that could just be my opinion, but the way I see it, Karl Marx was really more arguing against autocratic rule and a misunderstanding of what capitalism could be. There almost seems to be, in the way he describes capitalism, and by his own admission, capitalism has to happen before pure communism can happen because it's a logical step. He simply called for violent revolution to lead to the communist society. But I believe that call for violent revolution was more so kind of striking back against the autocrats more so than the capitalists, or at least that's what he was really going for. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, he certainly lived, excuse me, he certainly lived in a different time. And one of the big things is that there needs to be a revolution. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with my throat. 1 second.
No, you're good.
Yeah, that idea that there needs to be a revolution, that there needs to be blood, that you need to separate the people into this class and that class, which, by the way, we're seeing a lot of today. How many ways can we separate people? But it just seems to me that anything that you need to bring about or enforce via violence, such as a revolution, it may be something that's not a good idea. Like, revolutions have done wonderful things. I think we experienced that here in the US. But generally, if you have to force your whatever your ideology is upon somebody, it's probably not a good idea. Like, if you can't talk them into it. But again, that may be just because we live in a different world that I'm able to think that way. So because we don't live in some kind of autocratic society, I'm able to say, hey, let's talk it out, instead of I need to kill that guy in order to get my freedom.